Good afternoon and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we are interviewing Professor Mauro Guillén, a professor of international management at the Wharton School, a trustee of the Royal Foundation of Spain, and a member of several advisory boards at the World Economic Forum. Professor Guillén is also a recipient of several awards, including the Aspen Institute Faculty Pioneer Award and the Wharton MBA Core Teaching Award.
Professor Guillén, thank you for being here with us today. You're also the author of many books dealing with internationalization of the firm and global trends regarding organization and innovation. It's a privilege and we're truly honored to interview you today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. My name is Sarish Jasti. I'm a rising freshman at the Wharton School and I'm from Homedale, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots.
My name is Raul Kaworu. I'm a rising junior at St. Paul School in New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots. The first question that we always ask is, what are your company roots and how did they help you in shaping your ideas and becoming the person you are today?
Well, I was born in Spain and I was also raised there and I attended college in Spain. So obviously that has had a huge influence on me. I came here to the United States when I was in my early 20s to pursue graduate study. And I would say that by far the biggest influence though on me has been travel. So I've traveled to about 60 or 65 countries in the world. I spend actually very little time here in Philadelphia where I live. And I think getting to know on the ground the situation, what's going on in both rich and developing countries, in small towns and in big cities, is what has really shaped my way of thinking about the world.
Yeah.
Wow. And for our viewers who don't know as much about your work, can you briefly explain what you do?
Well, I study globalization. That's what I do. And globalization, of course, has many different dimensions. There's a political dimension to it. There's a demographic dimension to it, having to do with population. Also a social and, of course, an economic one. I focus a lot on economic globalization, but I also pay attention to the other dimensions of it. And essentially what I do is try to understand how the world changes, how each locality in the world changes because of the fact that it is connected to this broader context, which we call global society or the global economy. So in other words, I try to understand the effects at the local level of all of those global forces.
Okay.
So at Wharton, you are currently a holder of the Zamden Endowed Professorship in International Management. And was there a personal favorite class that you have taught? And if so, can you please describe some personal experiences you had with your students and also regarding what you taught?
So right now I teach 3 different classes at Wharton and at Penn, because I also have students from all over the campus. I teach an undergraduate class on globalization, and I have like over 200 students every year. And that one I think is really interesting because I have in the classroom students from engineering, from nursing, from the humanities, from the social sciences, from Wharton. So it's very interesting to see how they react to the material, right, from very different perspectives and very different kinds of career paths that they are hoping to pursue. I also teach MBA classes, in particular classes that have to do with how companies pursue international opportunities. And that's a completely different ballgame because in an MBA class, it's all about how can companies or more broadly organizations, also nonprofit organizations, be effective at what they do in a global context. That's what I do. And I also teach a class on managing disruptive change. So each year, the interesting thing about this class is that each year we rotate topics. Last year, we focused our attention on cryptocurrencies. And this coming fall semester, the class will focus on artificial intelligence applications.
Okay, wow. Kind of on the whole managing change idea, how do you see globalization playing out with the rise of nationalistic politics across the globe and also more recently COVID-19?
Well, look, I think this pandemic, unlike other crises that we've gone through, including other pandemics, is not a reversal of globalization. It's not a reversal of what was going on, but rather an intensification of trends. So I have a new forthcoming book called 2030, How Today's Biggest Trends Will Collide and Reshape the Future of Everything, which is coming out in August. And this book essentially lists a number of demographic, technological, and economic trends that are going to completely change the situation in the world within 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think this pandemic actually accelerates that. So if you want, I can give you a couple of examples as to how the pandemic accelerates trends that were already going on in the world.
Yeah. Thank you.
So one trend that is going to be accelerated as a result of this pandemic is the trend towards a greater economic inequality. You see, the pandemic itself, it's induced a recession, and as you know, unemployment has gone through the roof. But not everybody who have lost their jobs, those kinds of jobs are not a representative sample of the economy. So in other words, certain kinds of jobs, certain kinds of occupations, certain kinds of people have been more affected. But also think about remote learning and remote work. Not everybody can do it because you need a good internet connection. So you and I have it, but not everybody has that. Not everybody has a laptop at home. Not everyone has the ability to take advantage of technology in the way in which many of us can. So that's one trend that is going to be accelerated by this pandemic. A second trend that I think is going to be accelerated by this pandemic is the growth of emerging markets. So all of the forecasts point in the direction that economies such as Japan, Europe, and the United States will suffer more from this crisis than emerging markets. So in other words, the growth gap between emerging markets and the richest countries in the world will widen. And as a result, emerging markets are going to become the most important in the world much earlier than we thought.
Right. So, what were you saying, Sarge?
Just to clarify, when you mean emerging markets, do you mean the markets in the third world? Or like
emerging? So I think there are three types of markets in the world. So we have the richest markets, that would be Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And then you have the emerging markets, that would be China, India, Indonesia, Thailand, Turkey, Brazil, Mexico. And then the third category is the least developed parts of the world. So that would be Sub-Saharan Africa, that would be parts of the Middle East and parts of South Asia.
Right.
Okay.
So we were actually looking more into the description of your book, 2030, and how global transformations should be approached with the lateral thinking mindset, where you should look for out-of-the-box solutions. So can you please explain more about this method and why you feel this way?
Well, what I think is really important when you are trying to assess change in the world and the direction in which that change is taking us, it's extremely important not to rely on just one data point, one trend. You need to think about all of the different trends that together are taking us in a particular direction. And lateral thinking or lateral insights is all about looking for the connections between those trends. How do they reinforce each other? So for example, in the book, I explore how changes in population, we have different generations of people. You belong to a different generation than I do, for example. How that is driving technology adoption, and how that may, in the end, actually create a very different kind of global economy by the year 2030. So it's essentially connecting the dots between or among trends that at first sight may strike you as being completely unrelated.
Yeah, I see. So how do you recommend developing and really understanding the lateral thinking mindset? Because it's pretty easy to like say, connect the dots, but when the dots are like, kind of scattered and random, I feel like it would be a lot harder to do that.
I think there's only one way. There's only one way of becoming better at connecting the dots. And of course, connecting the dots is really important because you're going to be more effective.
Yeah.
As a leader, as an employee, as an analyst, in whatever occupation. Well, first of all, read my book, but more importantly, I think you need to step out of your comfort zone. You need to read widely. Talk to as many people as possible, not only your friends, people who think like yourself. You need to cast a wide net. You need to learn about things that maybe you didn't know about. You see, I have this discipline. Every night before I turn off the light in bed, I use my phone and I read one or two articles on a topic I know almost nothing about. Okay? So I look for something, right? It could be a historical topic. It could be something that is going on now. And in that way, I can develop, right, a practice of trying to see how that topic that I didn't know that much about relates to something that I know a lot about.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that discipline of casting a wide net, reading widely, talking to a lot of people,
Yeah.
and just being interested in many different kinds of things.
Right. So in terms of finding new things and stepping out of your comfort zone, what advice would you give to Wharton students who are trying to navigate their way through their education and opportunities?
Well, I think we are, of course, at a very peculiar moment in history.
Mhm.
And I don't think the pandemic, as I said earlier, is the reason. The pandemic accelerates what has
Yeah.
been going on. We are going towards a world in which, the weight, the importance of different parts, different countries is going to be very different.
Yeah.
We're going through a huge transformation, also driven by technology, of course. But it's not only technology, it's also how we're changing our lifestyles. The fact that we're having fewer babies, the fact that we're living longer. The world is going to be very different just because we're going to have more people above the age of 60, in the next few years. So I think that's what's important for a student right now to recognize that you have to acquire the analytical tools to understand those changes rather than to acquire knowledge that may be valid today, but in 10 years from now may be completely obsolete.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to have analytical tools. And those analytical tools can come from many different kinds of disciplines,
Right.
not just the quantitative ones. But what you need is to acquire perspectives, ways of thinking. You have to train your mind so that you can be very good at adapting to change.
Definitely.
Definitely, yeah. I read this one book recently called Manifesto for a Moral Revolution by Jacqueline Novogratz. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but
No, I have not read it.
okay. She's basically the CEO of Acumen, and they do a lot of work in like the developing world. And she describes using moral imagination to kind of go outside of the box to attack problems, because a lot of the problems that we face are, especially in developing countries, very corrupted. So, for example, in sustainable energy, a lot of the politics can be very corrupt, and so if anybody tries to go inside there, they're faced with more than just trying to appease the population, but like there's a complex network of people that are actively trying to keep the old traditional ways. So as we're trying to do more work in developing countries and provide them sustainable energy sources and better education and really just going along with the UN sustainability goals, how would you recommend people go about that?
Well, I would like to make 2 points about what you just said. First is that I strongly believe that the future belongs to those developing countries right now. I am very, very optimistic about the future of Africa.
Okay.
Things are changing in Africa. We see the beginnings of a middle class. We see, a lot of dynamism. They have a young population. Now, the challenges are enormous. Educating young people, feeding a growing population, and so on and so forth. But the second point that I would like to mention is equally important, which is that we can also learn from those countries. So you see, now in the midst of this pandemic, we are going big on telemedicine here in the United States.
Right.
Well, in Africa, they've been doing or practicing telemedicine for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Africa is also ahead of the curve in terms of mobile payments. They use mobile money more than we do here in the United States. So I think it's a two-way street. I think they can learn from us. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And also should paying attention to what they have accomplished, because I think there are many lessons for us to be learned.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was able to watch your interview with Dean Geoff Garrett, where you discussed a new course about the impact and implications of COVID-19, epidemics, natural history, and geopolitics on managing global business and financial uncertainty. So in specifics, what is the course material like in this class?
So this was a half semester class that we put together in a rush, because if you remember, the pandemic forced universities to shut down in the month of March, and we still had 6 weeks remaining of the semester. And there were a lot of students who couldn't go on study trips and so on and so forth. So there was a great need to both have more content offered and also to give people a perspective on what was going on in terms of the impact on the economy and on business of the pandemic. So we put together this 6-week class. Each week of class, for 3 hours, we would have two different Wharton faculty members lecture about a topic. We also interview the alums, and the students watch the videos. And in the end, we have 2,400 students either taking the class for credit or auditing it. It is the largest class ever in Wharton and Penn history. And it was all about helping people come to terms with the pandemic. And I think we succeeded at that. In other words, we offered people perspectives and approaches to understand what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's awesome.
So kind of going back to your roots, what drew you to researching international management and multinational firms?
I was always interested, as I mentioned earlier, on international issues. And I've always been fascinated by business firms. I majored as an undergraduate in political economy and business management. Mm-hmm. And from very early on, I was fascinated by how is it that companies can succeed in so many different countries? Because you see, every country is different.
Yeah.
There are challenges. And of course, not only that, there's also local competitors. So whatever firm tries to enter a new market always has to be better than the local competitors, or at least as good. So I was fascinated by those things. I continue to be. For me, it is really very interesting to see how, for example, a company as big and as powerful as Amazon only really has a presence in 1/3 of the world. As big, as powerful as Amazon is, it is not a company that has a universal presence in the world, right?
Yeah.
By contrast, that you have another company in the new economy, such as Google, that is essentially present in every country in the world, right? So these contrasts and these comparisons just fascinate me.
Yeah.
And as the director of Penn Cyber, which is the Center for International Business Education and Research, how would you describe your impact?
Yeah, so this was a center that no longer exists, I should say, but it was in operation for 15 years. And I was the director during the last 9 years. And what we tried to do was to both offer students on campus opportunities, practical opportunities to learn about business in an international context. And we also help local companies in the Philadelphia area become more international. So smaller firms that would like to sell their products or their services in foreign markets. So that was the purpose of the center. The purpose of the center was, in other words, to educate future generations of managers in terms of international business issues, and also to help local companies become more international.
Okay. Just a quick question on foreign markets. So you believe in the multinational corporation. Obviously, there's plenty of companies working in multiple nations. How would you describe the impact on local businesses when they're unable to compete? And how would you say we should kind of focus on that?
Well, I think, multinational firms, obviously, if they expand abroad, it's because they have certain capabilities, certain advantages that enable them to do so. Maybe they have their own technology, or they have a great brand that people in many different markets would like to purchase, or they have a cost advantage, or they have something, knowledge, organizational capacities that enables them to compete across many different markets. Now, keep in mind that when multinationals go to other countries around the world, they tend to benefit consumers because they offer them products or services that the local companies cannot offer. Mm-hmm. But they can also, create some negative consequences. And this very much depends, of course, on the sector. But they can contribute to inequality, for example, because they tend to pay higher wages than other kinds of firms. And of course, they can also put local firms out of business if they have a superior product or service that they offer to the market. So it is a controversial topic. I mean, there's also political aspects and social aspects to the activity of multinational corporations. And that's why, the topic is so rich and so attractive to study.
Yeah.
So throughout your career, you have become a distinguished professor, winning all types of awards. So has there been any particular award or achievement that has been really unique to you?
Well, of course, I have been very happy with the research awards that I have received. But I guess that any award that, recognizes your ability to communicate, and so I would include teaching awards. Mm-hmm. Every award that recognizes, whatever contributions you've made to create new educational programs, such as the Aspen Institute Award that you mentioned earlier, I think those are especially rewarding to me.
Okay.
Because that's where you see that you're having impact on young people in particular, and that's when you see, well, they actually are recognizing that they're learning something from you.
Right.
So on a personal note, what does individuality mean to you? And are there any cases of students or colleagues that you can remember that really exhibit this trait? And how would you say that they are successful in being unique?
Well, I think individuality, as opposed to individualism, is a very good thing, in the sense that we're all human beings with our own particular, characteristics, inclinations, tastes, preferences, and of course, we each, make a difference in the world in a different way, right?
Yeah.
With our friends, with our family, and so on and so forth. So I think in individuality to me means, making a dent, hopefully in a good way in the world, right? And again, premised on the assumption that we're all different. We're all little creatures, but we have, very different perspectives. And it is, of course, part of individuality also, by the way, to respect other individualities, so not just your own, right? I don't think individuality makes as much sense as individualities in the plural, right? Because I cannot develop my own individuality without respecting those of others around me.
Right. And are there any, students or colleagues that you remember that really exhibit the trait?
Oh, sure. Many of them, if not most of them. And of course, when it comes to my colleagues at work, I know them very well. So I know what is their unique, their, personal way of helping others, of making a difference in the world. When it comes to students, obviously I teach hundreds of them every year. So I cannot remember all of their names, but I do stay with them, in touch with them. I send emails, updating them as to what I'm doing, and I get a lot of responses back. And sure, I mean, I wouldn't want to single out one name, because that wouldn't do justice to all of the others. But look, I mean, I've had students who have done all sorts of things that are amazing, right, in life. I mean, they've launched organizations, they have helped others, they have pursued a career that maybe is not as lucrative, but they, wanted to do good in the world. So there's many people that I have had the honor of meeting over the years. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we always end the interview off on the same question. What advice would you give to the current and next generation of high school students that would like to start the process to make a positive impact on society? And how would you recommend they start this process?
So let me just emphasize one point. There are many others, of course, that can be emphasized, but I would like to highlight the following, which is try to understand how the world works in its totality. So before you decide on what is it that you want to do, before you start making decisions about what to study, what to do with your summers, what to do with your free time, and so on and so forth, try to understand how the world works, and then identify what is it in that understanding that you've gained that needs to be improved or that needs to be changed. And then you can focus your energies on that. But first of all, try to understand. Don't rush to conclusions in the sense of saying, oh, I want to do this because I see this as a big problem or a big opportunity in the world. Take one step back and try to see if that's really the case. And that's actually the area in which you can make the most impact.
Yeah, so keeping your horizons broad.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye-bye, guys.